Northwest Sports Podcast back once again. Kyle and Josh here, and we're going to discuss some of the hotter topics that we were thinking about in the American League as we were going through the teams. And we have some burning questions that we found very interesting that we wanted to discuss, and we felt they'd be very informative to you as well. And we're going to start in the AL East, and we're going to break it down, and we'll also have a NL version of this as well. But to start off, we're going to go to the Baltimore Orioles. And Kyle, the first question I would like to ask you is, who is going to pitch for this team? They have no good pitching that is consistent. They ruin every pitching prospect they have, it seems like. Kevin Gausman now has shoulder tendonitis. Chris Tillman's their theoretical number one starter, and his ERA was like 4.5 last year. I'm just not sold on this team being able to challenge for the division with their complete lack of starting pitching.
Yeah, it's going to be a major uphill battle for them. Fortunately for them, they do have a really good hitting lineup, so that'll definitely bode well for them. They don't seem overly concerned with pitching. To them, it's a thing of the past. No, but in all seriousness, they do actually have one of the better bullpens, so let's give them a little bit of credit on that.
They re-signed Darren O'Day, as we discussed in the offseason review. He's fantastic. Showalter's great at managing the bullpen, and Zach Britton's one of the best closers that no one really talks about because he doesn't have the massive strikeout numbers that a Kenley Jensen or a Wade Davis have.
Yeah, absolutely. Darren O'Day is a really solid player. So we're looking at, you already mentioned Chris Tillman. They do have Ubaldo Jimenez.
Is that really a good thing?
It's not a bad thing. I mean, when you have a lineup like that, it's really not that terrible. We're talking about guys like Miguel Gonzalez. Can these guys keep the ERA under 4? Better yet, can they keep it under 3.7? I still happen to be a big believer in Dylan Bundy and what he could do. So
it'd be nice if they let him use his cutter.
Right. They also have Four Eyes Vance Worley. I mean, that's a legitimate threat at the end of the 5th spot there. No, I'm just kidding, everybody. But no, they have a lot of questions that they need to answer. But I really think it's been a little bit overstated how bad they're going to be because they really do. They just really need to keep the earned runs under 4, which really isn't that out of the question for them. I have a question for you, though.
Yes.
Shoop, there it is.
I'm a very big fan of Jonathan Shoop, their second baseman. If he can stay healthy, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he had 25 home runs in a season. He's only 24 years old. He's coming into his theoretical prime. And that in and of itself speaks to the larger issue and problem with the Orioles is I would not be surprised at all if they not only led the American League but baseball in home runs and strikeouts. Because their batting lineup with the Pedro Alvarez's and the Chris Davises and J.J. Hardy and Adam Jones and Mark Trumbo and even Manny Machado, and to a certain extent, they're going to hit a lot of home runs. They're going to strike out a lot. They're going to have to outscore their opponents. I mean, and I think that's a given with how we're talking about their starting pitching and the lack thereof.
So are we going to see like the KKK, a Baltimore Orioles story, 2016?
I mean, I don't know if they're going to call it that. That's kind of bad marketing-wise. I don't think that's going to sell well for a Netflix and Amazon instant video. But, I mean, Manny Machado should hit over 30 home runs. Adam Jones has and could hit over 30. Pedro Alvarez has hit over 30. Chris Davis could hit 50. I just said Shoop could hit 25. If Wieters stayed healthy somehow, he could hit 20. I mean, it's just insane the power they have and also their lack of starting pitching.
Moral of the story, kids. If you're an Orioles fan, it's a great year to find yourself at Camden Yards because chances are you're going to get a baseball for that collection.
Make sure you bring your glove or buy a big enough popcorn ball so that way you can catch it and not hurt your hand. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about with the Baltimore Orioles? I feel like those are the two defining factors of their team right now, and the biggest questions need to be answered: the starting pitching, the strikeout rate.
Yeah, those are my real questions. Obviously, we have to wait and see what happens with the Gausman injury because he's going to be an integral part to what they're trying to accomplish.
I am a very big fan of Gausman in general, but it's just so concerning to see another one of their really good starting pitching prospects have medical issues, to go with Dylan Bundy and also Hunter Harvey, who is also another big prospect that had major medical issues.
Yep.
And speaking of major medical issues, I think one of the biggest issues moving forward now, talking about the Boston Red Sox, is they also have a lot of injury questions along their very talented team, ranging from Clay Buchholz to Dustin Pedroia to Pablo Sandoval to Blake Swihart to Hanley Ramirez to David Ortiz to Koji Uehara. I mean, they have a lot of guys that have injury histories to go along with their really good young talent.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, though. They have a lot of projectable talent. So you really wonder what we can expect from them this year. when it comes to that. I expect Bogarts to take a step forward. I expect Betts to take a step forward. I think the whole baseball community is really rooting for Jackie Bradley because of how good defensively he is, how his ability to be, an OBP machine. I really like him. One question I do have, though, is Rooney Castillo a bust?
He very well might be. I think this season they're going to give him every opportunity to play in left field every day, and they also have Chris Young, who's a fantastic platoon guy, especially in the outfield. Okay defensively, bats really well as a platoon. He did that with the Yankees as well, and he'll be a nice way to give all their outfielders potentially days off because he can play every position in the outfield if needed. You obviously don't really want him in center field, but in a pinch you can put him there.
Right.
But I think Castillo has to show something this year, or else they may, with all their talent coming up and currently in the majors, they may put him on the trading block next offseason.
Well, and I think it's funny. I think it's a good point that you mentioned giving the other outfielders a day off because that's exactly what they would be doing for the pitchers that he'd be facing. He'd be giving them a day off. Because I watched this guy hit last year, and he was god awful.
Chris Young or Castillo?
Castillo.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't show anything. He looked lost. He looked like a sad little puppy just wondering for a little scrap of food. And that's a really terrible analogy to make.
Yeah,
but at the same time, that's how bad he looked at the plate.
Which, I mean, everyone got excited for all the tools he shows. And then he had that nice 3-week stretch 2 years ago. Then last year with the injuries and the poor contact rate, and from some of the reports that I saw, some poor conditioning going into spring training last year as well. It just didn't come together for him. And I think that that's something he really needs to work on because he does have the theoretical physical tools to be a great everyday player. He does. There's no denying that. I want to see every player be successful, and then I want to see them all lose to the Seattle Mariners, and that's never going to happen. But, I mean, I don't want injuries. No one likes injuries. If you're not good, I want you to be not good because you're on a natural aging curve or you just have a flaw in your game that for some reason you can't fix. I don't want someone, to have an injury and then they can't recover. That's not what anyone wants to see. And this is another team, Kyle, that, in my opinion, has a lot of questions with the starting pitching. Obviously, they have a legit major ace with David Price, but Clay Buchholz, a major medical question marks. Eduardo Rodriguez is already injured. Joe Kelly's very up and down. Rick Porcello was pretty bad last year at the beginning. Started to get better in the second half, but they do have some Henry Owens types that could potentially fill gaps. But are you worried about the starting pitching for the Red Sox after their ace and David Ortiz?
I'm worried, but
David Price.
Yeah. I'm worried, but at the same time, like you had mentioned, Henry Owens is there. Hopefully Eduardo's just a small setback. Joe Kelly cannot be the fifth starter if they really want to make it to the playoffs. But
theoretically, you wouldn't have to use him in the playoffs at least.
No, not in the playoffs. Make it to the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I just think that, their hitters are going to be what carries them. So as long as you have Price being stable at the top of the lineup, I think it's going to kind of bleed down confidence throughout the rest of the rotation. And Eduardo, like we said, he's not as amazing as maybe we had hoped, but there's still a lot of projectable upside with him. So I think
he definitely could be a number 3 starter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think that is the projected upside on him.
Yeah.
So. Right now he might be more like a 4th starter because he was actually pretty solid last year. But I think that Boston might be a year away.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, but they want kind of like Baltimore in a different way as opposed to mega power. I feel like they're going to make a lot of contact, get on base, make things happen. They do have a couple of big thumpers in David Ortiz and Hanley Ramirez, and I do believe that Travis Shaw could be a everyday first baseman if Hanley doesn't work out. So
there's a lot of upside there.
Oh, yes.
They could easily win this division. I don't mean to sound like they can't. I have them
They have
as
a
number
much
2
better shot than Baltimore, in my opinion.
They do, and they probably have a better shot than the Yankees as well.
And that's the team we're going to touch on next. Good segue, Kyle. Is this team too old?
Of course
because they were solid last year, but now they're a year older. They didn't make any major free agent acquisitions. They did trade for Starwin Castro and Aroldis Chapman when he comes back from his 30-day suspension. But I just am concerned with the continued deterioration of their injuries and their age, that them taking this year off so they can spend big the next 2 winners, which is what everyone thinks is going to bite them. And I think they may finish last or next to Baltimore to be last in the division.
I think so too. I think the biggest problem with them is exactly what you said, is how do they factor going into 2016? Because, like you said, once Teixeira is off the books, once A-Rod's off the books, those are some major
Carlos
cons
Beltran
that
and
need to fall.
CC, all four of them
Beltran,
come off within the next 2 years.
That's very good points. They'll still have some guys that probably won't be contributing too much on the payroll.
Ellsbury in a couple years.
Ellsbury, McCann likely will be pushed over to first base. I doubt he stays a catcher that long. And he's not really what you really want at first base, so he might not even be a factor going forward. So they're going to remake this roster, but the question needs to be asked, can you even rely on Tanaka? This is the guy you went out and paid. I mean, I feel like he's shown flashes of dominance, but most of that was in the first 2 months.
And there's always been the injury issues with him and the lingering elbow blowout that everyone's worried about. And I feel like you said, after the pitchers got to look at his splitter, 3-4 times, that they started not necessarily to figure it out, but to be able to lay off it a little bit more, so that way that his K rate gone down, and I think that's a direct cause and effect of that.
Yep.
I do like their bullpen. Obviously, is out of this world. I do like some of their starters. I think Luis Severino could be a legit future number 2, and he may get there this year. There's a lot of really great sophomore pitchers in all of baseball, from Lance McCullers to Severino, Tawan Walker, Joe Ross. So he's in that group of guys that could step up and make a major impact. But their starting pitching is good, but there is a lot of risk there.
There is, although I will say, from the outside looking in, there's not a lot of teams that could say their 5th and 6th starters would be Ivan Noah, and then
CC Sabathia is probably their 5th starter.
That's what I'm saying.
What if
that's actually not that bad if they do stay healthy all this year? I mean, maybe they're that team that they're old, but at the same time, maybe they, sometimes the older teams have a lot of pride, and really the only thing holding them back isn't skill; it's just injury. Yep. So, I mean, this is still a team that could compete. I just think that it's not very probable given that all the issues that, Rodriguez has had throughout the years. I mean, obviously he was healthy last year. Teixeira's had issues throughout. We already touched on Ellsbury's injury issues. There's just a lot. Gardner. I mean, there's a lot of injuries going on with this team.
Yeah, and it's hopefully, like we said, everyone can stay healthy, but that's obviously has never happened before, and it never will. And speaking of things that have never happened, it feels like the Tampa Bay Rays have never really been able to hit over the last 3-4 years. I think that is their biggest question mark right now in the offseason and going into the end of spring training is, are they going to be able to score enough runs? Obviously, their defense is very good. They have very good at managing platoons. They do have a few high upside hitters like a Steven Souza and Richie Schaefer if he gets a job. Their pitching is great. Their bullpen is very good, even with the Brad Boxberger injury. He's out 2 to 3 months. Kyle, are they going to be able to hit enough to even compete in this division?
No, I really don't think that that's even a possibility. I loved the trade they made for Dickerson. I think that was a really important move. But the team is really defensive oriented. I mean, that's really what they're going to hang their hat on. And they're going to try their damnedest to make that work for them. You've got the best center fielder defensively in baseball right now. You've got potentially one of the best starting rotations in baseball. If Matt Moore can make a comeback this year, we were just talking about this before we started the podcast. This is a guy who, as Josh was saying, was on the level of Steven Strasburg as a prospect when both of those guys were coming out. And so I think that, if he can regain his form, all of a sudden, him and Archer, that's a dominant 1-2.
And then
dominant.
Drew Smiley's K rate is out of this world. If he could ever stay healthy,
Yep.
Jake Odorizzi is a very consistent pitcher and gets things done. And even Erasmo showed some improvement last year.
Yeah.
So it'll be very curious to see if Tampa Bay can tinker their way to some platoons and some surprise guys, some surprise hitters like an Oakland Athletics always have to do to scrap some runs together to potentially challenge this division, because they do have the defense and pitching to dominate, especially with a guy like Chris Archer, who had almost 260 strikeouts last year, and I think there's still upside for him to get into the 280 range.
Yeah, they just can't hit. I mean, it's just they can't hit. It's even if you project all the upside into their lineup, even when you factor that in, they can't hit. So I mean, they would need it. It would honestly be a miracle. And let's not forget that Friedman is no longer a part of this organization. So they are is in a bit of a quasi rebuilding mode, as much as the Tampa Bay Rays can be in a rebuilding mode, because they're kind of perpetually in a rebuilding mode with how they have to remake their roster every year. But this is truly a rebuilding year for them. So I guess before we move on real quick, do you see a player on their team that they sell high on this year? Is there a member of that pitching staff that you could see them dealing and it being almost a blockbuster trade?
If I had to pick one of their starting pitchers that I think would get traded most likely at the deadline, it would be Jake Odorizzi. I don't think they're going to trade Chris Archer. He's too young. He's not in arbitration yet. He's too good. Matt Morris signed to a cheap deal, so if all of a sudden he puts it together, they're going to keep him. Sure. Erasmo is not defined as a blockbuster. Yeah, and I don't think that Drew Smyly has the...
Maybe Alex Cobb, though, when he comes back. And he's not coming back to August.
No, he's too late. And I think that Drew Smyly is very good, but he also has injury worries, and he has to put it together for fully to build his trade value. So I think Jake Odorizzi is a realistic trade option. You know, if there's a team out there that has a lot of hitters and needs a pitcher, like per se the team we're going to talk about now, the Toronto Blue Jays, they have a lot of overflow. There's all these rumors about them not wanting to re-sign Jose Bautista and Edwin Encarnacion. Now, I'm not saying they're going to trade those guys for Jake Odorizzi, but that is the exact type of scenario where a hitter for a pitcher trade makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
And speaking of the Toronto Blue Jays, as we mentioned, they're kind of the direct opposite of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays in a way, where they have good defense and their pitching is extremely questionable, to say the least. They do have Marcus Stroman, who we're both big fans of. I don't know if he's ever going to be a major strikeout pitcher, but I think he's going to be a really, really, really good pitcher, kind of like a Mark Burley type in terms of results. You know, he's going to have a great whip, great ERA, keep the ball in the ballpark and get strikeouts when he needs it, but he's not going to be a Chris Archer type when it comes to strikeouts. But this is a team that is clearly built around their offense. Based off WAR projections, they're projected to have the best shortstop, the best third baseman, the best catcher, and the best DH, and the second best right fielder in the American League. And, of course, that would be Jose Bautista, Troy Tulowitzki, Josh Donaldson, Russell Martin, and Edwin Encarnacion. And not to mention, they have Kevin Pillar, who's a really good defensive center fielder, and he steals bases, gets on base. Cristobal Bello, Justin Smoke, Michael Saunders should make a crazy, pretty good, if they stay healthy, left field, first base platoon action there. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can scrap together the pitchers. I mean, Aaron Sanchez never developed as a starter. I think they should give him more tries, though, because there's so much more value. Their bullpen's okay, but outside of Marcus...
Their bullpen's good.
We'll see what happens. If Sanchez is shoved in the bullpen, totally agree with you.
What do you... Okay, we might actually disagree on this. Why do you not think their pen is good?
I think they have two very good bullpen pieces. Who's the third?
Cecil.
I'm not sold.
He's at a 2.45 ERA for 4 years in a row.
I want to see the K rate. I want to see the whip. Like, I'm not.
What do you need to see 4 years in a row for good production?
ERA is very fluctuating in a bullpen.
Not for 4 years in a row.
You could give up, yes, 4 years in a row. If he gives up five, if he had a 5 ERA this year, I wouldn't be surprised.
What?
Yep.
You can't just make something like that up.
I'm not big on Brett Cecil. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm not big on him either. I don't think he's a great reliever. I just think that he's a good reliever. And I think when you have three good relievers...
Why do you lose the closing job?
Because Ozuna's better?
No, or is it because of injuries and he's starting to fall off?
I don't think he's going to fall off. He got shelled the very first month of the season.
Oh.
And then he didn't give up...
His results fluctuated? And he got...
I
was really good, really
all
bad?
of you to go look at his stats after June 1st. He did not give up a single run until the end of the year.
Can we also look up his usage to see how it was used?
Who cares, man?
It matters.
He didn't give up a single run from June
in 7 innings.
Whatever, man. I'm just saying that this is a guy who their pen's better than he's telling you. I think that this is a team that needs to try to figure out a way to get something for Bautista or Edwin Encarnacion because they have such a good hitting lineup. They're going to be such an effective pitching staff.
Well, I brought up the rough idea. Would you make a deal like Jose Bautista for Jake Odorizzi and Steven Souza as a base? You get your young pitcher you can build around to go the Stroman, and Souza presents a lot of upside with a lot of risk. and then maybe throw another B prospect in there, and then Tampa gets their major offensive star if they're playing well with their pitching and defense, who's on a 1-year deal, so there's low risk in terms of their payroll. Does that make potential sense? I know Jose Bautista is the heart and soul of the Blue Jays, especially the fan base, but in terms of pure player value.
It doesn't make sense from the Tampa Bay Rays perspective because they're not going to be good this year. They know that. Now, if you're talking about a team that...
I think if you put Jose Bautista on that team, that they could scrap together enough runs with that pitching and defense where they could challenge for the wild card. And if you just get in the playoffs, anything can happen.
Maybe. That's a stretch. I don't see that happening.
It's a stretch to say Brett Cecil's a really good reliever.
Look at his stats. He's really good. Pull him up.
What
He's
about
good.
their starting pitching, Kyle?
Okay.
That's where I was originally trying to go.
Their starting
before
pitching...
you got super defensive about your son, Brett Cecil, who has a career 4.21 ERA,
Look
by the way.
at the last 3 years. He's been good. Here's the thing, though. I could see a guy like Batista going to a team like the Mets. They don't have a lot of money.
Where are they going to play him?
It doesn't matter. They'll
Yes,
figure
it
out a way.
does.
They'll figure
They're going
out
to put
a
him in center field and move Cespedes to second base.
way. Who's playing right field?
Cespedes, if they're smart.
He's not playing right. He's playing center. Who's
Yeah,
playing
because
right
Curtis
field for the Mets?
Granderson's in right field.
That's
And then
a
you have
good point.
Conforto left and Juan Lagares as an incredible defensive center fielder to make up for Cespedes being horrible.
So maybe you deal a guy. I don't know. I'm just saying they're a team that has the pitchers.
Maybe they'll trade for Conforto and just put Batista in left.
Maybe they'll trade freaking Steven Matz and Michael Conforto for Jose Bautista.
Toronto does that deal right now. No,
That's what I'm
without
saying.
question.
That's
That's,
what
a
I'm saying.
win-win
That's
for
what I'm
Toronto.
saying.
New York would never do that.
Well, they wouldn't
Ever.
get rid of Matz. He's too good.
They
but-
wouldn't get rid of Conforto for Jose Batista with that money costing the upcoming free agency.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think Conforto is going to be that great, personally.
I don't
but-
either, but when you look at
Okay,
everything,
Granderson and Matz for Jose Bautista.
why would Toronto want Granderson?
Because he's expiring anyways.
What's
He's a
the
guy
difference
who's going to
between
hit a ton of
Granderson
home
and
runs in
Dalton
that
Pompey?
bandbox. Are you serious?
Yeah, Dalton
Granderson
Pompey is a
hits 40
fantastic
home
defender.
runs.
Do you think he's going to hit 40 home runs this year?
Granderson has hit 40 home runs. I should say
Back
that.
when he was in the Yankees in Detroit.
He hit 26 last year. He had a real big, nice rebound season. He's going to go to a bandbox. Right now, he's in New York Mets where, they have a big field.
They do have a big field.
And when he was at his best, he was batting .230 in Yankee Stadium, hitting 40 home runs. He could do the same thing for the Blue Jays.
That was also like 6 years ago.
It was like 4 years ago. But anyways, that's a potential trade situation for all of you insiders out there.
Apparently, the Blue Jays are a hot button issue for me and Kyle.
No, we're trying to make this interesting for you guys at home.
No, I just hate Brett Cecil.
It's okay to hate Brett Cecil. I just, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were really pimping him out, and I got excited. I really wanted to come at you with a new angle.
I'm glad you picked Brett Cecil. Not
I know,
afraid.
really, right. Okay, so he had a 2.48 ERA last year. He had a 54 innings pitched, 70 strikeouts, .96 WHIP.
I would love to be wrong. I'm just not buying it. I would love to be wrong. Is that a good way to put it?
Okay, so last 3 years, 2.82, 2.7, 2.48. He's gotten better every year he's been a reliever. It's not his fault he's a failed starter.
And he's ready for a downward trend, unfortunately.
Why?
Because
He had his
he's a
best
reliever. That's
year
what
ever
relievers
last
do.
year.
That's what relievers do.
He had
He had his best year and he
ever.
didn't keep his job.
Opponents batted 197 off of him last year.
Fantastic.
Well, of course he didn't get the job. Osuna's amazing.
And he's not even. Nazuna's not even going to keep the job because it's going to Drew Storm.
That's BS. That should not happen.
I like
But
Drew Storm.
You want to know why they're going to do that? Because if you get saves, you get paid. And they don't want to pay the arbitration numbers on this kid when he has all these saves.
They should try to make him a starter because he was a
I've
starter in the
heard
minors.
that as a possibility. It makes a lot of sense, though.
I still think St. Louis should have tried to have Trevor Rosenthal start. Obviously, he's an incredible closer, but anytime you can have a starter versus a closer, the starter is obviously going to present way more value.
Exactly what we talked about with the Wade Miley, Carson Smith deal. It's just starting pitchers are way more valuable. So
Well, they also got Rowan Elias, so it's not like they
That's true.
didn't get another starter.
that's true.
Anyway, let's talk about deals, and let's talk about the Chicago White Sox and how their moves in the offseason really kind of solidified this lineup in a way. Not only did they trade for Brett Lowry and Todd Frazier, but they also signed Jimmy Rollins at the beginning of spring training. Now, I don't think he's the end-all, be-all, but I do think that he presents a nice veteran bridge to the prospect Tim Anderson as well.
That was a good pick.
And I think this lineup's going to be able to put some numbers on the board, and they do have some very solid pitching as well. Not only do they have maybe the best pitcher in the American League, Chris Sale, but Jose Quintana is just the best pitcher no one talks about. Love Jose Quintana.
Consistent.
But I think my biggest question with this team is I just worry that they're not really going to be able to. They're kind of like the Baltimore Orioles to me in terms of I worry about their on-base numbers. I do like Adam Eaton, but I mean their defense in the outfield is very suspect with Cabrera getting older and Garcia being pretty bad. I just have a lot of foundational concerns about this team and this organization. Obviously, we don't even need to touch on the Adam LaRoche issues. But do you have just base questions about how they're building their team? I don't really see many elite defenders.
No, and like you had brought up the point, they brought in 3 guys this year who have a OBP each of under like 310 or something like that. That's not really...
Yeah, Todd Frazier doesn't walk that much. Brett Lowry does, and Jimmy Rollins definitely doesn't walk much anymore.
Yeah, super surprising. I mean, Brett Lowry had 144 strikeouts last year, or I should say Ks, whatever you want to say. It's just... At 299 OBP, really? Like, I don't know. Like, he's a young player with upside, so I mean, I like that.
Does he really have upside though? Like, shouldn't he have figured it out?
Does.
Shouldn't he have figured it out at some point? I'd love to be wrong. The ballpark's certainly going to help him out, but he was highly touted as a big time like power prospect in a way of middle infield, like a new Chase Utley. And he's never really put everything together. And maybe he just is what he is at this point.
Well, maybe he's a guy who just needs to play a full freaking season.
He played 149 games last year. That's pretty close to a full season.
He had his best year.
And his OBP was under 300.
Well, maybe that's who he is.
Which was his worst year for on-base percentage.
Well, I mean, maybe he bounces back, So, I don't know. I'm okay with what they did. Like I said, it doesn't seem very new age. It doesn't seem like they're really overly concerned with metrics that everybody else is concerned with. I mean, we're looking at Todd Frazier's 309 OBP last year, but you don't really care when he has 35 home runs. But
yeah, 35.
I mean, the question is, you have all this power, you have all this flash. Who's going to be on base when you hit the home run?
I mean, they just,
are you gonna just Chris Sale just need to go 1-0 now?
Are you just gonna clone Adam Eaton? Like, what is your plan? Like, I totally agree. Like, is Jose Abreu going to have 32 home runs and 70 RBIs?
Yeah.
I mean, really, like, he's their best on-base guy. He's also their best hitter. I mean, him and Adam Eaton, everyone else besides him and Eaton don't really have a good walk rate.
Yeah.
So I do worry that they're going to have a lot of home runs, but not many overall runs. I mean, Melky Cabrera's OBP was 314 last year, and he's only getting older and bigger.
Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we really like their pitching. I really like their pitching.
Carlos Rodon could be an ace this year if he gets his walks under control. Yep. His slider's almost unhittable.
I was a big fan of the buy low on Matt Latos. I mean, this is a guy who just a couple years ago, really 2 years ago, before he had the
injuries, the labrum,
the elbow injury last year, I believe it was. He was just every single year in the league, under 3.70 ERA. Really solid player.
In a bad ballpark, too, in Cincinnati.
Yeah. And who knows if Jonathan Danks can rebound. But maybe he can. Pitchers are like that sometimes.
Speaking of bullpens that are surprisingly okay, I do like the White Sox bullpen a little bit. I think David Robertson's a very underrated closer. Everyone, since he left the Yankees, forgets about him, but he still is a 90 strikeout closer.
Yeah.
I like Zach Duke. Nate Jones is good. Zach Putman brings things to the table. They have a solid bullpen, so that's something to say. Their ballpark certainly doesn't help out their numbers. Would you say they have a better
bullpen than the Blue Jays?
Yes.
That's freaking nuts to me, but we'll move on. Who's better in this bullpen?
David Robertson would be the best reliever on either team.
I don't think he's better than Osuna.
But
that's a projection. That's a projection. That's not a fact. That's a projection. But Drew Storen's better than their second best reliever. And Brett Cecil's better than their second best.
I don't know. Zach Duke's really good.
He's all right.
I like Zach Duke. And Nate Jones is nothing to sneeze at. But let's talk. Speaking of really good pitching, here's a burning question. Who is actually the best starting pitcher on the Cleveland Indians, Kyle?
That's tough. I think it could. Obviously, the
Kluber's
easy choice is
the
Kluber.
favorite in the clubhouse. Carlos Carrasco has some of the best metric and percentage numbers in baseball for someone who hasn't put it together. And Danny Salazar is a fantastic pitcher as well. And if Trevor Bauer could ever repeat his delivery long enough to go through a nice stretch of the season, he could be a sub-3 ERA guy with 250 strikeouts.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen probably, but still, it gets to the point where they're starting pitching, maybe they're top 5, maybe the best in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Let's see here. I think that they are a team that it's kind of sad, considering how good their pitching is, what they have been able to surround their team with. Because, I mean, they have talent. It just doesn't seem like they have enough. You'd love
I feel like they've been very unlucky with injuries, too.
They've been unlucky, but you just wish that somebody around there would convince them to spend some money.
Yeah.
If they were a team that gambled in free agency and added like a good piece or two, they would be really good. They would be really, really good.
And I feel like with a Lindor finally up and Urshel at third instead of Chisenhall, and Malte in center, Brantley should be ready for opening day. Their defense might finally get back to where it was a few years ago, and that should really help the pitching staff's numbers as well. What they really need is they need just a big thumper in that lineup. They need a 35 home run guy. This would have been a really good spot for Pedro Alvarez type player.
Yeah.
A 1-year deal, a guy that can come in, hit 220, take a few walks, and hit a lot of home runs for all their guys that get on base in front of him, like Lindor, Santana, Kipnis, Brantley. So, I think a big key to this team, lineup-wise, would be how Yan Gomes returns
Yeah.
from his injuries to see how that goes. That's going to be interesting to see. Do you have any questions or thoughts on this team really quick? Like I said, they're going to be led by their starting pitching, and I think that they should challenge for a wild card in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. I really do think that they'll challenge for a wild card. And I think Yan Gomes really stepped up the batting average in the second half of the season. So he's an interesting guy that I'm looking at. Mike Napoli they brought in to play first base. Who knows? I mean, I'm just saying he's a guy that just, he's there. So I don't know. For me, the Indians, I was really
Terry
hoping-
Francona definitely knows Napoli, at least knows how to use them.
very
so,
well, and
yeah.
I really, really wish that they had made a splash. Maybe they're planning on it next year, but I just think that, gosh, this team is so close. There's like that pitching. If they could just get in the playoffs, they would be so difficult to deal with if they had
It would
a
be
power hitter.
very similar to the Mets.
If they had Todd Frazier, that kind of player,
Yeah.
I would be okay with it. 35 home runs, middle of
And
the
they had the
order bat.
prospects
Who
to get it
cares?
done, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have moved Brady Aiken and just some random one person, and they easily would have got done. Aiken for Frazier would have easily gotten that deal done.
Probably.
I mean, maybe they want to keep him for when they can't afford to pay Salazar or something. Who knows what their long-term plan is. But at some point, you have to bite the bullet like the Oakland Athletics did in their John Lester trade and trade some prospects, try to make a run at it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's risky. It doesn't always pay off, but I mean, they do have a nice little bullpen there that they're working on. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And speaking of not being afraid of taking risks, we're going to talk about the Detroit Tigers. How good is this lineup?
Really good.
Is it? Let's talk about the Blue Jays a little bit more, Kyle. Is the Detroit Tigers lineup better than the Toronto Blue Jays? Because I think it's
man.
right next to it.
It's close.
I mean, the Tigers arguably have the best hitter out of both teams, and Miguel Cabrera if he's healthy.
Yeah, I would still say the Blue Jays because I mean I think Josh Donaldson at this point is as good of a hitter as Miguel Cabrera.
What about JD Martinez? You love him.
Okay, well let's go guy by guy though. I mean,
JD Martinez or Jose Batista? I take Martinez this year.
I take Martinez too.
Okay, Miguel Cabrera or Josh Donaldson?
I take Josh Donaldson.
I will take Cabrera for maybe one more season, but a lot of that has to do with the walk rate
You're
and
not
overall
drafting
hitting.
Cabrera in front of Donaldson in fantasy though, so
I don't want to draft Donaldson either because I don't want to pay for his best season of his career.
You would though.
I would if he was around where Cabrera's going.
Okay, either way.
Troy Tulowitzki or Justin Upton. Well, I guess this makes more sense. Justin Upton or Edwin Encarnacion.
I would probably still lean Edwin
I think I agree with
because
you.
so much power. But at the same time, Blue Jays. I said Blue Jays are better. So I mean,
I agree with you. I'm just
there's
trying
a
to.
huge gap between catcher there.
Well, and I was also going to say that Tulo is much better than Victor Martinez or Ian Kinsler at this moment, so that he makes a big jump.
That's true.
Who we
and not
didn't
to
even
mention
mention.
Devin Travis when he comes back from injury is probably going to be way better than Ian Kinsler. Although that's
Is
not,
Ian Kinsler your least favorite player in baseball?
I hate Ian Kinsler. I think he's a whiny little prick who I'm not a fan of.
Hashtag Rangers fan.
I still have his bobblehead in a box that I haven't opened.
Should we have burned his poster and have you drove over instead of Josh Hamilton's?
That would probably be a really fun YouTube video to make this summer when I'm really drunk. So during the bonfire, look out for it on YouTube. We're going to burn Ian Kinsler in the box.
Oh.
So we'll see what happens. But I like Detroit. I think their pitching staff's really good.
I'm a little iffy on the pitching staff because I'm down on
back.
Zimmerman. Sanchez can't stay healthy. I want to see Verlander put that second half into a full season. Mike Pelfrey's not any good. I do like Daniel Norris, but he's still young and improving. Same thing with Michael Fulmer. I do like how they finally spent a little bit of money on the bullpen, not only in buying their theoretical closer in K-Rod, but they also paid for Mark Lowe, who's a very good middle reliever.
Yeah.
So instead of getting one, they got two. So they were trying to fix problems. And I do like that they did that. I do like how they brought in Maben and Goose, and Iglesias is back to help with the defense, which has been another problem in the past. So I do like this team. And I think, much like Cleveland, those three teams, along with KC, are going to be the teams that are fighting for this division.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, I know you're a big Sean Green fan. Talk to us about it.
I do like Sean Green.
Well, we'll see what happens.
But he's a very good fifth starter.
How much of Victor Martinez's health factors into your projection this year?
Almost none, because I assume he's going to miss half the season.
But how important is he if he's there and
if he's in that lineup
2 years ago?
He will not be that good. But if he's batting, he will get on base 360. Yeah. And that is going to be huge for their run output. I don't think he's going to have the power he had 2 years ago, but I do believe that he can still get on base. I do think he's the team leader, and I do believe in those things, even though you can't measure them in statistics. I do believe in team chemistry and things like that, and I think he's a key cog to that. Similar to David Ortiz, although David Ortiz is a much better power hitter at this stage in their career for sure. But what are your thoughts on Victor Martinez?
Over under 20 home runs.
Under.
If he has 500 plate appearances.
Under.
I'd say
it would be
over.
close. I would say like 18.
Yeah, I would say over because 2 years ago he had 32. Now, that was the aberration because before that it was 12, 14, 32, and then back down to 11. So I would probably lean over if he hit that again. Because
17, 18.
I mean, but 18 is pretty safe, so I wouldn't disagree too much there. Very critical piece, though. I mean, because that's a guy you're paying a lot of money to.
And I think the team loves him.
Yeah, it's surprising they re-signed him. I think a lot of people were surprised because
I was surprised.
Because, he doesn't have a lot of upside to offer, and, it probably was a major clubhouse move, so.
Yep. And speaking of great team chemistry and major clubhouse moves, the Royals, coming off the World Series, the team has been together forever. They brought back Alex Gordon. I do worry about them after the World Series, not necessarily being as motivated, but just not having everything click. You know what I mean? I still worry this team is going to be able to score enough runs. I worry that their starting pitching's good enough. I'm curious to see how the bullpen is without the three-headed monster. Obviously, they brought in Soria to attempt to replace the Greg Halden aspect, but still, I think they have a lot of questions right now.
They do have a lot of questions. I still feel relatively good about them. None of the projections really favor them. Like Steamer.
They've never favored them ever.
No, never. And
just like the projections never like Matt Cain when he was a really good pitcher for 5 years.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I think Cain's a guy we talked about a little bit before we started the podcast. A very interesting guy. Still potentially pointing up on the arrow there. They just have guys where it almost feels like if they hadn't done what they did, you'd be looking at this lineup like, meh.
Yeah.
But because they've done it the last 2 or 3 years, you're like, okay,
Lorenzo Cain had an over 7 WAR last year. That's just crazy.
Didn't Mike Trout, when in his best year, have like a 9 WAR?
Harper hit over 10 last year, and Trout in his best year hit 9, 8.
Isn't that crazy to think there's really only like 2 games difference between Mike Trout and Lorenzo Cain?
I mean, it's
a big difference in the scheme of things.
But it shows you how good Lorenzo Cain actually is.
But wow,
especially for a guy that doesn't hit a ton of home runs, he's fantastic. And one question that I've been curious about forever: does Eric Hosmer ever just put all those tools and all that athleticism together to be that MVP type, the Joey Votto type that we thought he was going to be, including myself? I've been a big fan of Hosmer for a very long time.
He had his best season last year. He was really good. So
yep,
I definitely think that Yes, I still think it's somewhat in there.
Does he ever hit 30 home runs in a season? Because I say no, but I could easily see 25,
I could see
which
him,
would be a big jump.
Jacoby Ellsbury hit 32.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying, is it possible? Yes. There's no doubt it's possible.
I'm not trying to talk about outliers here like Ellsbury.
Well, I'm just saying he's got a lot more power, and he's a guy who, once he puts it all together, I really do think that. I mean, he had 297 batting average, if I recall correctly, last year. He was a guy who was really good.
Yeah, his slugging was only 460, which is still good. But 33 doubles last year, but only 18 home runs. So
maybe he puts a little bit more pressure on himself.
Yeah.
We've seen guys start to sell out for the home run later in their careers, especially when they're trying to get paid.
Yeah.
So,
and he is a free agent in a couple seasons,
yes,
so
he is.
It'll be interesting to see not only how he does this year, but how Kansas City, who they decide to sign and extend. I really feel like Escobar's gone after this year. They're just going to give that job to Mondesi,
yeah.
which is totally fine with me.
They have
Escobar's
to.
not that good. So I think the two guys they're going to pay, it's going to be Kane and Hosmer. I think Moustakas is third on that list.
I do too. Although I really am. I have a weird feeling about Moustakas this year. I think he's gonna have a good year.
You just think he's just going to be a monster?
I do. For whatever reason, I think the power is finally going to
Top
be
10
really
third baseman in
consistent.
fantasy?
Yeah, I do.
Top 6.
No, I just think that the top 10's a favorable projection
Okay.
for him. I really
Okay.
like him. I don't know. I just feel like I saw a little bit of growth in him last year.
And speaking of seeing growth in them last year, the Minnesota Twins made some nice development last year. Some of their young players developed and made steps. But someone who didn't really take that many steps forward was Byron Buxton. Obviously, injuries have been a massive problem for him, but I'm more worried about him making contact and hitting enough to be that elite player that everyone thought he was going to be. Kyle, what are your thoughts on him? Because I just feel like that he's going to be great defensively, has a good arm, but I don't know if he's going to hit enough to be that perennial all-star that we thought he was going to be.
I don't know if he is either. I mean, he's still really young.
Is he 23,
He's
22?
22, I think.
Yeah, he's 22. He turned 22 in December, so he's a young 22.
Yeah, so it's brutal to say he can't, but at the same time, I do have questions. I think either way, he's going to end up having a pretty solid career when it's all said and done.
Is there anything wrong if he became a new Mike Cameron? Fantastic defender, really good power, okay hitter, still an all-star type every year, but not that MVP type that he may have been.
It'd be a disappointment,
But he'd still be valuable, though.
I'd still be. I think the Twins would still be very happy with that. So I mean, that's one thing to consider. How do you feel about Miguel Sano? Do you think that obviously we know the power is real, but will he get there? Will he hit 35 home runs and have an OBP over 200?
He's going to hit 35 home runs this season.
Yeah, I think so.
This dude is a monster. I don't know if he'll ever be able to play a position. I don't know, honestly. And he's so big, he can't play third base. They've already given up on that. Good for you. Everyone knew that was coming, including them, but there's no reason not to try it.
Right.
Kind of like Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo's has a much better shot of staying a third, but the same principle behind it. He may be more successful in the outfield. So they're going to toy around with Miguel Sano in right field to use his strong arm, but maybe he won't have the range there. So maybe when Mauer's contract's finally off the books, they'll just push him to first base. Or at the very least, he'll be their DH. But that guy, if he didn't hit 30 home runs this year outside of injury, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
Very surprised. I think he's going to be basically David Ortiz, maybe with a better walk rate and less average. But I think Sano, David Ortiz, obviously size-wise, they look very similar, but I think they're going to have similar production.
Yeah, that's a fair projection. I don't think he'll ever be that good, but I mean, as far as the consistency over his career, that's a pretty damn good player to compare him to. But I mean, like I said, I mean he's an interesting
It's not like I said he's going to be Edgar Martinez.
Yeah,
He's
no,
better
for
than
sure.
David Ortiz.
Oh, come on.
Oh, we don't need to talk about that. We can break out the stats whenever you want.
Oh,
We'll have a little.
I'd be more than happy to.
We'll have a sidebar debate on that. And speaking of a sidebar debate, let's talk. All right, we're not going to go in order here. We're just going to jump straight to the Texas Rangers in the AL West here. Kyle, I'm not even going to ask any questions yet. I'm just going to let you say some stuff.
Well, I'm really, there's a lot of things I really want to say, but I'll try to keep it quick. I really like Chirinos. I think he's a good catcher. I think the Rangers.
It's Chin Horse. Come on.
Yeah, Chin Horse. Yes, I think that if you know anything about the Cardinals catcher, his brother is actually the catching coach for the Rangers. And
Which one? He has two brothers. There's Benji and
Not Benji.
what's the other one's name?
I can't remember his name for the life of me.
Well, whatever.
But he's the one who found Chirinos, and he is the guy who. Well, maybe it is Benji actually. I don't know. Either way. He's a guy who I'm really excited about, and that's probably the boringest thing you'd expect a Rangers fan to talk about. I think Profar's showing a little bit of guile here. I think he's maybe going to be something here, potentially a very valuable trade piece with Odor and Andrews being there. Maybe they deal Andrews.
No one wants that fucking contract.
Nobody.
I mean, you can trade any player, obviously, but no one's like calling the Rangers back, hey, what do you want for Andrus?
Nobody's given up anything valuable for him, like as far as like long term. But I mean, you might get like a 1-year rental for him if somebody's interested in getting a shortstop. The Rangers are going to have some young kids coming up where they're going to have some leeway on the cap.
They're going to have to make some moves and trade some people, or have Beltrade win a World Series this year and retire, make some space, because like they have obviously they don't have too many guys coming up, but they have like Gallo should be in the outfield, Mazara should be in the outfield, Brinson should be in the outfield.
Gallo can play first base though.
Well,
easily.
he has a monster right field arm, so I'm just projecting in terms of defense. DeShields still needs to play every day, most likely, if he continues his improvement. Shin-Soo Choo is a long-term contract. I mean, they're just loaded with guys.
Yeah, and the problem with the Rangers is that the contracts of Shin-Soo Choo and Prince Fielder are so long.
Yeah.
They both still have, I believe, 4 years left on, or Shin-Soo Choo has 5 years left on his deal.
Prince has
Prince
5
has
and
4.
a player option or something.
I think it's 4.
And Andrus has 5 years too.
Yeah, so they just have a lot of long-term contracts. So it'll be interesting. Their ownership wants to spend money though, so they're fine as far as that's concerned. Although, the pitching staff, I'm really excited about. I think that Darvish is going to come back mid-May, be really good. Cole Hamels, really nice anchor. Who knows with the health of like Holland? There's a big battle.
Or health with Martin Perez, or health with Colby Lewis.
And who knows if Martin Perez will ever accomplish what he looked like he would be,
in that 8-week stretch.
Yeah, that first call up. And then on top of that, is Holland really going to stay healthy? Who's going to win the job between Chi and Nick Martinez?
Are you worried that Chi hasn't just taken that job over the last season and a half?
I'm very worried because he has no out pitch.
Yeah, it's very concerning to me. He seems like a Yovani Gallardo type in terms of he gets the job done, but he looks like he should be a 2 or a 3, but he's really a 4 or 5.
Yeah, but
especially younger Gallardo.
I was gonna say younger Gallardo though was a power pitcher. He had some stuff. He had a really good K9. He was a really, really, really good pitcher.
Yeah, but he lost it quick.
He did. He
worry
lost
about
it
that
every single year.
Yeah, and I worry about that type of thing with Chi because he does not have a Cole Hamels changeup. Yeah. He does not have an Adam Wainwright curveball. He does not have that. It's 3-2. I have to strike this guy out. I'm going to my bread and butter.
And there's not enough velocity in between the separation of his pitches. He actually has really good command. I mean, the guy's got a lot of really good pitches. It's just he doesn't have enough velocity. There's no separation in that velocity between the secondary pitches to really do anything. So, Texas Rangers, they're definitely going to win that division. I don't think that's a question.
Whoa! I think it's a question for me.
I don't think it's a question.
You're a Rangers fan.
Super dominant.
You're a Rangers fan.
Super dominant. They had so many questions going into last year, and they still won the division.
I don't think they had that many questions. I think it was a more overblown issue. I mean, you could probably listen to a podcast we did last year, and I completely am wrong. But I don't know what everyone was super concerned about last year outside of the Darvish injury.
Darvish?
I just said outside of the Darvish injury.
Okay, so there's no Cole Hamels. No Cole Hamels.
I know.
Okay. Derek Holland hurt his shoulder on the very first game he pitched. Martin Perez wasn't coming back for a while. So you didn't even have a rotation.
But their batting lineup is...
rotation was Yovani Gallardo,
who was pretty good
Wandy Rodriguez.
Who made moves?
He did, but that's a question.
Their lineup was
nobody had
great.
What's Keone Kela going to be?
We both like Keone Kela.
I did too, but you don't know. Tolleson, what's he going to be?
You didn't know what Carlos Correa was going to do last year either.
Okay.
You don't know until you know.
He was the number 1 prospect, basically. So that's slightly different.
I'm just saying their batting lineup last year I think was very underrated.
I agree with you.
That's where my hesitation was.
Super good. But people were worried. Prince Fielder was bad the year before. He had the neck surgery.
Yeah, because he had neck surgery. Look at Peyton Manning.
Right. Shin-Soo Choo was not that good before. So you had a ton of injury questions related to the Rangers. That's kind of where it's coming from.
Well, since we did your team first, we're going to have to jump to mine. It's only fair. We can save the division-winning Houston Astros to last. So, do you want me to just start talking? Because I let you just talk about your team? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Seattle Mariners, Jerry Dipoto decided he just wanted to completely remake this team and change almost half the 40-man roster. He did keep the core of Seager, Cano, Cruz, and Felix Hernandez. I am very concerned still about this team overall. I hate the bullpen. I think this is one of the worst bullpens in baseball that is supposed to be for a contending team. Obviously, it's not as bad as the Phillies, but still, if you looked at every potential playoff team's bullpen, I think the Mariners might have the worst one. Tony Zych is really good, potentially, but that's about it. I do like the depth in the rotation. When you have a guy, even though he's been as hurt as and inconsistent as James Paxton, who's going to start the year in AAA, that's nice depth. I love the pickup of Carnes and Miley for what they're going to bring to the rotation. I think Taijuan Walker takes the next step forward. I'm a little bit concerned that Felix Hernandez's best days are behind him, but I still think he can be a really good pitcher. Maybe he goes from that ace to a Cole Hamels level. Instead of being the king, he's now just, the past king. I do like the improvements on defense, though, overall, especially in the outfield with Aoki and Martin and the Goody Seth Smith platoon and Ketel Marte. I'm very high on him. My main concerns, though, are the bullpen, and I just think that we're going to lose a lot of games that we shouldn't because this bullpen is a dumpster fire.
Well, keep in mind that Chisek, his first 3 years pitching relief, he was actually really good. I think Ben Waugh actually had a pretty solid season last year. I'm glad you brought up Zych because a lot of people are touting him as being potentially the savior of that bullpen, and that's a really brutal word to use. So I don't mean the savior, but he could be the guy to break out in that bullpen, potentially carry them just a little bit. He had a pretty solid year last year as far as like coming up and doing some things. I love what they did this offseason. They had such a bleak outlook going into the offseason. I think they did a lot to reverse that. I'm with you on Ketel Marte. I think he's one of those interesting guys. He's fun to watch. He's really fun to watch.
Him and Martin solve some of the problems we had last year in the batting lineup in terms of we had almost no athleticism as a team.
Yeah.
We had no guys that were really threat on the base paths. James Jones wasn't good enough to play every day, and now he was traded to Texas, and Texas let go of him, and I don't know where he is now. I'm sure he's in a camp somewhere because he's too fast and a solid defensive guy. But I am not really worried about the batting order as much as I've been pretty much every year since 2003.
Yeah, no, it's a lot better, and Nelson Cruz. Hopefully he can piggyback on that last season.
I'm sure the average is going to go down, but if he hits 280 and 35 home runs, no complaints.
Yeah, if it's 30 home runs, it's still really nice.
Yeah.
For the contract you guys got him on for, that was a bargain deal.
Yep, and Cano might have one of his last elite seasons. I do buy that second half resurgence, and he was injured when he was dominating one of the best hitters in baseball in the second half.
Yep.
Kyle Seager's Mr. Consistent. Adam Lind is the perfect first base platoon guy. He's going to kill righties, and hopefully Jesus Montero or Stefan Romero come in and platoon for the lefties. Gutierrez was great in a platoon. This bullpen is so concerning to me. I'm very worried that we're going to lose a lot of games that we shouldn't.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. So maybe that's how it goes. But I think ultimately you did a pretty good job of trying to remake the roster with not a lot of options. And
yeah, especially with our bad minor league system. I mean, the Rangers have a great system. Maybe not the best in baseball, but definitely a system you'd say is like
top 10.
A- plus, top 10, very healthy. Guys near the top, guys in the low minors that are a lot of balance. The Mariners, they had one of the worst development years via injuries and just bad play that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, they were.
Like all their guys got hurt or stagnated development. So it was very concerning. Hopefully all that turns around with new coaches and a new direction from the front office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any other points that I missed, Kyle? I feel like everywhere we're okay and no major issues out. I mean, maybe catcher, but Ioneta's a solid defensive guy, and if Zunino ever puts it all together, he's obviously a fantastic defensive catcher. So I'm not worried about catcher. I mean, that alone should give us 2 extra wins, not having Zunino bat.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not much more to talk about. Hopefully they just, get a little bit of an improvement there from last year.
And speaking of a team that a little bit of improvement, if not a lot of improvement, we're jumped in the Oakland Athletics. Obviously, this team is always ever changing. We already brought up the Tampa Bay Rays comparison, where they're very similar organizations and philosophies, where they like to build through pitching, defense, bullpen, and try to find platoons and hidden values like a Josh Donaldson a few years ago. And speaking of hidden values, we're both, I believe, pretty high on Josh Reddick. A very solid player, fantastic defender in right field, one of the best right fielders in baseball, great arm, great range, great instincts. But obviously, this batting lineup, they did make a late move for Chris Davis to give him some power. I do like that, especially if they put him at DH every once in a while to help with the defensive issues. Chris Coughlin should be a nice platoon utility guy.
He might play a lot, too.
Is Marcus Semien going to take another step? I love Billy Burns. Is Coco Crisp going to stay healthy? Danny Valencia, was that second half real? He's never hit for that much power before. Yeah. Michael Cana, Yonder Alonso is interesting, but my main question is their pitching going to be good enough? That's usually, you don't worry about Oakland. They have the legit ace in in Sonny Gray, even without the elite K rate, but they've had so many injuries to their starting rotation, and unfortunately Jared Parker just went down with another most likely season and potentially creating an injury, which is sad. But I worry that their starting pitching obviously isn't going to be nearly as elite, or, they may not have the diamonds in a rough this year. You can't find, Jesse Chavez's and stuff every year, can you?
No, and, I like the fact that they brought in, speaking on as far as, the bullpen, Doolittle, hopefully he recovers. Madsen, hopefully he recovers. They're expecting big things out of Rich Hill, so we'll see what happens.
He's been horrible in spring training.
Of course he is. I have no idea why they brought him in. That's super awkward. Henderson Alvarez, though, Jesse Hahn, these are some guys that... they're not flashy names, but they're guys that could potentially pitch pretty well.
Kendall Graveman I find intriguing as a fourth starter type that can overperform projection, maybe.
Yeah, potentially. I don't love him, but, it's interesting at least. I believe they do have Felix Doubront, who, has been a serviceable fifth rotation guy for some teams. So, maybe he's a guy who you lean on a little bit. I actually kind of like the Athletics to have a major bounce back year. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs or anything crazy like that, but I do think that, they underachieved so vehemently last year that they could be a team to look out for. They could definitely play spoiler alert for a couple of teams towards the end of the season when they're trying to make a run. So I kind of like what they're doing, but I really do think the injuries have just sapped that pitching, of its potential. And so, hopefully they can figure that out. But I think they really messed up with that Samardzija trade. That was the one that really hurt him the most.
The Josh Donaldson trade, in terms of, you could have gotten more value.
Yeah, that was they should have not gotten...
everyone likes Franklin Bieto.
Yeah.
As a 19-year-old prospect at shortstop, he's developing really nicely, but still, it's Josh Donaldson. Everyone knew this guy was like a top 5 MVP type player even before last year, and I felt like they could have got maybe more prospects, or he was. Even though it seemed like there was a big falling out between him and the organization, but either way, I just felt like they could have got more for him. Is all.
Yeah, I just think that smarter trade is why did you trade?
Quick pop quiz: Who is Oakland Athletics' highest paid player?
If I had to guess, are we talking about this year per year, or are we talking about total life?
Their salary this year, just for the season.
It's got to be Sean Doolittle.
Coco Crisp.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I just knew they paid Doolittle.
Coco Crisp will not be an everyday player, so even the Athletics make mistakes financially. It happens. Injuries happen. Things like that happen. And speaking of making mistakes financially, we're going to jump to the Los Angeles Angels here.
We're going to spend a very short amount of time on the Los Angeles Angels.
So this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to just run the gambit really quick. This is how you can describe the Los Angeles Angels here. This is a stars and scrub fantasy team with not nearly enough stars on it.
Yeah, and
they have Mike Trout, probably the best player in baseball. Him or Harper, take your pick. It doesn't really matter. Albert Pujols obviously showed a ton of power last year, and if he can repeat that power, that bodes well for the lineup. I think Cole Calhoun is solid-ish. They have the best defensive shortstop in baseball, and they have 2 pitchers I like. And Houston Street and Joe Smith are okay in the bullpen.
Yeah.
And that's the Angels.
Yeah, Jared Weaver's thrown 81 this year, folks. It's sad.
It's
TJ Wilson's messing with his delivery.
That's sad because it's injury-related. And I do like C.J. Wilson. He's a guy that wanted to stay in Texas, and they didn't want him, really.
Yeah, we didn't.
So, and he's been solid since he left.
That would have been a fair... He signed a pretty fair deal.
Yeah, he did. It was 5.85.
Yeah,
something like that.
It was 5.80.
Yeah, in today's day and age, that's nothing bad.
Under 3.5 ERA. I mean, it's not terrible.
Yeah. And I do think Garrett Richards bounced back to that near ace level, that number 2 type pitcher. You think he's going to have a good year. I do like Andrew Heaney. I think he should establish himself as a solid pitcher. Maybe Matt Shoemaker can find the magic again. He was pretty good 2 years ago for a stretch.
We'll see.
But I think this is by far the worst team in the division. Obviously, maybe the star power carries them. Maybe Garrett Richards is just lights out again, and Mike Trout does Mike Trout things, and they just scrape together 84 wins, and Oakland's the worst team or something. Who knows? But I'm not buying it. I think this is the worst team in the division. I think Mike Scioscia finally gets fired at some point this year, and I think this whole team is going to get blown up in the offseason, and they'll keep Richards and Trout as their linchpins for the rotation and lineup, because honestly, you can't really get equal value for especially Trout. I mean, you could trade him to Boston for Jan Makata and all these prospects and Mookie Betts maybe even, but then you're just sitting back your winning timetable even further. So I don't think this team's any good at all. Kyle, do you disagree?
Not at all.
Do you think they trade Houston Streaks? I think he'd be a very good bullpen piece for someone if they're bad.
I mean, halfway through the season when it's clear they're not going to make it, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I want it'd be big though. Is there one thing that, if it happened for the Angels perfectly, could really change your perspective on them? And what I'm specifically referring to is Andrelton Simmons coming up not only was lauded as maybe the next Ozzie Smith defensively, he was supposed to be a very good hitter.
Yeah.
And what if
he was a pitcher, wasn't he?
Originally, yeah.
Yeah.
And what if he figures out hitting? What if he hits 280 with a 360 on base and 10 home runs? Like, that could be a huge step for them lineup-wise to start to scoring a lot more runs.
But they lost Eric Ibar, so, I mean, really, he'd only be replacing that.
Yeah, but Yoel Escobar at third is better than David Freese.
Yeah.
So what if C.J. Cron decides he wants to be good?
I think I hate to say this.
I'm just trying to be positive about them.
I think their only chance is to make a mega deal with the Mets
for
Mike Trout. I really think that's the only chance that this organization has.
So what are you thinking? Like Conforto, Syndergaard, and someone?
Conforto, Syndergaard, has to be Steven Matz.
I
have to get two.
If I'm the Mets, I don't do it.
Well, okay, that's fine. But I'm not trading Mike Trout for less than 2 starters and a starting hitter.
I agree with you. I'm just saying for the Mets, they shouldn't do it. They don't need to.
No, they don't.
Well, I mean, Trout's to be the best player, obviously, but still, you're trading too much value if you want to win now.
Right. So I would definitely have to throw in Granderson. So I'd be like, you need to eat Granderson because we have no money.
So, supposedly, fucking they're in New York at a great ballpark.
I have no idea. They keep blaming Bobby Bonilla, and it's like, really?
That dude gets $1 million a year.
That much.
He gets $1.3 million a year. I mean, I'd love to get $1.3 million a year, but that's not the issue. Okay, the issue is tight-pocketed owners, and you're still dealing with the after effects of the Ponzi scheme. But guess what? You're in New York. You can spend some money. It shouldn't have taken you that long to sign Cespedes.
Spend a shitload of money.
They should have signed other people in the offseason. They should have made moves. You were that close to the World Series. You're literally not going to make any major signing. Neil Walker, nice deal. All he's going to do is maybe be a smidgen better than Daniel Murphy.
And when you do sign a guy, you sign Kadire, who you have to give a pickup for.
Yeah,
that's just weird.
I
can't criticize Sandy Alderson.
Yes, you can. You can criticize everyone.
What he's done has been fantastic.
You can make great moves and make a bad move, and you should still be called out for the bad move just as you're praised for the great moves.
I'm with you on that.
That Kadire move was one of the dumbest moves of that offseason, if not number one. There was no way he was going to repeat that production he had in his best year ever in Colorado. He was 34 at the time, if not 35.
Yeah,
he was playing outfield, and he couldn't play first base because Duda was there, and Duda was a better power hitter. And he couldn't play outfield because your outfield's too big and he's too old. It was one of the worst moves of that offseason, and it didn't matter. And the credit to the Mets for the pitching development and smart trades, but that was not a good move, and there's no reason not to call him out on that. Right. And speaking of not good moves, are you still on the Scott Feldman bandwagon for the Houston Astros that you were on 2 years ago? Because I'm still feeling pretty good. That was a bad move at the time.
I mean, he's been serviceable. He's pitched a lot. He hasn't been that hurt.
He's pitched a lot.
I mean,
Wandy Rodriguez has pitched a lot, Kyle.
I didn't love the deal. I just said, hey, for a 3-year short-term deal, I didn't think it was that terrible. All right. Well, and he's had, I want to say in his first year, he had a pretty decent year for them.
All right.
He's just ugly ass.
Well, let's get on point here. I believe they will win the division this year. Without bringing up the Rangers fandom, I want you to tell me why the Astros are going to win the division. You go positive, and I'll try to go negative with it. We'll flip the script here a little
Yeah,
bit.
they're an interesting team. I mean, you got Carlos Gomez in center. He's a guy if he rebounds.
Shortstop. You said Carlos Gomez. Oh, Carlos Gomez. Then Carlos Correa. I'm
Yeah,
already
it's all
thinking
good.
about the future MVP. of the
It's
American
all
League.
good. Yeah, so Gomez.
Too many Carloses.
Yeah, he's a potential, 25, 40 guy. He's got a great arm, super athletic. Springer, he's 26. Will he actually make that step forward as a prospect? Long time lauded prospect, but now he's been in the majors for 3 years and we really haven't seen, a ton from what we thought he would be.
We've definitely seen the tools.
We've seen the tools. He's actually got a pretty good above average eye, so his OBP's not bad.
So in this scenario, since they're going to win the division, you're arguing that aspect. Do you think he'll put it together this year and stay healthy?
I guess since I'm arguing for them, I think he will. And then I would, they've got obviously the best shortstop in baseball already, so Correa is going to be an amazing asset for them. Probably the best second baseman in baseball, so that infield right there is pretty good. They did lose Chris Carter, and that's going to at least take some of the home runs away, but I'm not really worried about that because he struck out so often. Their pitching staff is going to be really good because I'm arguing for them.
I like their starting pitching.
I mean, Lance McCullers is an interesting guy. I mean, he showed a lot of upside, but he's already banged up.
I believe in the potential Doug Fister resurgence.
They lost Scott Kazmir, who was really good for them down the stretch.
Who's throwing 86 for the Dodgers
Doesn't matter.
now.
He was super good for them at the end, so that's going to be interesting to see how they replace him. I don't know if they have a fifth starter yet, so that'll be interesting how that plays
That
out.
will be interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, they're a team that has some question marks. There's not a lot of consistency on their team, but there's a shitload of upside. And so and it's a young ball club. Like I said, I think that they're actually going to take a step back this year.
Now, you definitely did not argue the positive like you're
It's
supposed
really
to.
hard for
no,
me
it's
to,
not.
because there's so
You're
much
a Rangers
projection.
fan. That's the only reason
There's
it's hard
so
for you.
much projection involved in their lineup. Nobody's really done it very consistently.
Jose Altuve is one of the most consistent players in
he's
baseball.
one player.
Exactly. Colby Rasmus and Luis Valverde are very consistent.
Oh
they're
my
not good, but
God.
they're very consistent. Hey, Luis Valverde hit 24 home
He
runs last
batted
year.
190.
It doesn't matter if you had 24 home runs.
Ask the Orioles about that.
I know they're all bound and they tried to trade for him last
Pay
week.
Bueno $50 million a year or something. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Who starts at first base for them?
I don't know.
Because John Singleton is
said
never
Trevor
shown
White.
it. Tyler White is
Tyler White.
looking pretty okay, and AJ Reed was maybe the best hitter in the minors last year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see because if AJ Reed can come in, that is the type of guy they don't have right now in terms of
Yeah.
walks, in terms of contact, and in terms of I'm not going to play any defense because this team is loaded defensively. That is the main reason I like this
They're
team. They're
very
so
good
athletic.
defensively.
They're so young. Their best defensive outfielder is Jake Marinzik, and he isn't even starting for them. And that's
Yeah.
not even a shot on him. It's just Colby Rasmus, Gomez, and Springer are all really good defensively, and they're just better hitters overall. Valbuena is a solid third baseman. He's probably the worst defender.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if AJ Reed comes up and takes that spot from Singleton or Tyler White, 'cause they're both better defensively. But I think you're a little bit low on Colin McHugh.
Yeah.
I like his K rate. I like what he brings to the table. If he just gets more consistent, he can be a very good number 3. The issue is he's slotted as the 2. But Kohlers you'd like to see as the 2, but he does have a little bit of shoulder issues right now. But I think it's going to be a good thing for him because that way he'll just be on the deal at the start of the year, work his way back up, and his innings will be fine for the playoffs.
Yeah, no,
So I think that might work out.
That actually will work out.
They have one of the best closers in baseball, Ken Giles. That guy's a monster.
Yeah, he's a
they
beast.
traded a ton for him, but he is really good. And Gregerson may not be happy about not closing, but he's a good reliever who's now going to be the 8th inning that just pushes everyone down a spot.
Yeah,
so.
and he doesn't have great stuff.
No.
I really like
He
Tony.
gets the job done. He's kind of like Brett Cecil.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised if Tony Sepp ends up earning that job halfway through.
Or
the year.
Josh Fields has a lot of strikeout potential. He,
Yeah.
once again, not been consistent. One of the worst first-round picks of the recent Mariners history, which is saying something.
Yeah,
So-
so I like the Astros. I think they're really good. I just think that when I look at the roster, there's just so much has to go right for them. And granted, it has the last 2 years, so I mean, there's that too.
Yeah, but there's a lot that hasn't gone right. Like last year, Springer and Gomez were nothing, and they still made the playoffs.
Yeah, that's true. That's only because the other 3 teams in the division that were supposed to be good were really, really shitty.
Well, I never thought Oakland was supposed to be good, but Seattle definitely underperformed.
They were supposed to be
year.
good, but they were supposed to be better than that. I mean, like,
I don't know, man.
A
Every
little.
year they can't do it smoke and mirrors. Every year you're just going to be bad one year.
yeah, they were supposed to be a little bit better though. I thought it was pretty bad how bad they were. Like it was bad, and the Angels were obviously not good last year. I mean, well, they weren't terrible, I guess, but I don't know. The Mariners took a huge step back from their expectations, so I don't know. I feel like they took advantage of a lot of that.
Did
but
they finish second?
I think so. I think
So we just have them flip flopped.
Yeah, they're shooing.
Because I got Texas second in the wild
Yeah,
card.
I think they're shooing. The only reason why I take Texas is because they're
He has a Texas hat on right now, folks. Okay,
I do. So.
Kyle, anything you'd like to add about the American League?
I just want to say thanks so much to the listeners. Really appreciate the 34 views that we got on our last mock draft. Small potatoes to some people, but we really appreciate any time somebody comes by and listens to podcasts. Hopefully you guys will, start talking crap to us on Twitter and we can block some of you guys. That'd be really fun to
I
do.
don't want to block anyone.
I don't want to block anybody, but I want to feel that anxiety. Like, gosh, these guys are burning me. I need to block them so that I have my Twitter account back. I mean, that's totally a joke. I really do want you to just throw shade at me on Twitter. So yeah,
Is Shade 2016's Bay? Out of nowhere, everyone's saying Shade.
I hadn't noticed that.
I've never noticed it until 4 days ago.
Man.
And now I see shade everywhere.
Wow.
And I'm not even looking at trees.
Wow. Maybe we need to change it to shadow.
Yeah.
People throwing shadow on me. Yeah.
That sounds way cooler.
It does.
Anyway, we're getting way off topic. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yep. Have a good one.